Is Clevatess worth watching? There's a lot to like and a lot to be aware of for this dark fantasy anime, so let's get into its vibe and storytelling, all spoiler free, except for the first episode, to see if it's worth watching for you. Clevatess starts with a special 45-minute episode to get you into its story, which is always a good sign. It begins with a pretty generic opening, a group of heroes off to slay a dangerous Lord of Beast, and because it's a dark fantasy, it doesn't go too well. In the monster's counterattack against humanity, he finds a helpless child and, on a whim, decides to raise him to learn more about humanity. Resurrecting one of the heroes he had killed for information, they venture into the human world to find a wet nurse to feed the baby. From here, their adventure begins. There's a lot more to it than that, but I don't want to spoil a lot of the more interesting details of this first episode. The premise is incredibly cool, but incredibly difficult to pull off. Having an evil monster lord be one of the main protagonists of the story is a bold decision, but it works really well because it's clear that Clevatess, who is the monster, thinks of humans in a similar way that humans think of dark beasts. So he's not exactly evil, but he also doesn't value human life. This also brings a lot of tension to the story, as Alicia, the main human character, must obey Clevatess while keeping the baby alive, or her master will continue the destruction of humanity. It's a dark and intense concept that is executed very well for the most part. While the main goal of Clevatess that drives the story seems vague, immediately they get thrown in interesting situations that lead to even bigger problems that expand the world and develop the characters. It's very tightly written and the pacing is excellent. I never felt like it was dragging, and nothing felt rushed either. Because of the high stakes and brutal violence, while also not making the characters too overpowered, there's a ton of tension, especially whenever the baby is threatened. On to the few negatives I have. While the characters are generally well written and interesting, the dynamic between the hero and monster could be a little more antagonistic. They're just a little too friendly too quickly, and there's some comedy regarding Alicia's character that clashes with the weight of her situation. As for Clevatess, while most of the time I really like his characterization, he gets right on the edge of just being a person instead of the godlike monster that he is. Of course, this is part of his character development and goal to understand humans, but sometimes it does feel like he begins to understand them a little too quickly. Pretty minor complaints, but those do take me out of it a little bit. Now, it's important to mention that this is a dark fantasy seinen show. Overall, it doesn't have a super dark tone, but it does have more mature aspects, like intense bloody violence and sexual assault. It doesn't graphically show rape, but it is heavily implied that it has happened and could happen. This adds a lot of weight to some arcs, but obviously if you are sensitive to it, viewer discretion. Overall, Clevatess is great. It's really well paced, got great animation, great world building, and has a really interesting story, with only a few occasional tonal problems. I give Clevatess a B rank, and it's an 8, but it could very easily get to A. Let me know what you think in the comments if you've watched it, and check out this review of Lord of Mysteries here on this end screen. It's a very unique show. That's all for me. Subscribe for more seasonal reviews and recommendations. Jamio.